you were almost you were in charge of bringing it over, or on the board of bringing it over from Japan. And kind of tell a little bit of that story to our listeners. I think they would love to hear that.
Well, I was a faculty member at Washington State University on the Animal Sciences Department, and this must have been around 1989. There's a international marketing program in the state that tries to develop markets, agricultural markets for Pacific Rim countries. And so they knew the tariffs and quotas were going to come off of meat in Japan in 1991. And so the university sent 3 of us to Japan to try to figure out how we would compete on that market, because the Midwest is a corn belt considered the best beef area in the nation, but we're closer to Japan. So we're trying to get an edge on exporting meat. So 3 of us, a rural sociologist and 2 animal scientists, maybe in one, went to Japan. The rural sociologist, Ray Jisome, speaks fluent Japanese, had studied at Cornell and studied in Japan the culture. And so he knew the things we should do and shouldn't do and say, and how we should dress and not spit our chewing tobacco and things like that. So we toured all of Japan and talked to the cattlemen. We talked to the university people and the AI studs that developed this. And we came back to WSU saying we had never seen meat like we saw in Japan. We saw it in the restaurants, we saw it in the packing plants, and as an American, I thought our USDA choice was the best meat in the world, but I soon saw that it wasn't.
Wow.
So our option 1 that we thought we should do was to bring those genetics here, cross them with our cattle, feed them here, and send the meat back to Japan. And we had a Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C., who was out of Spokane, named Tom Foley. And his name is still known by a lot of people, but he was a friend of Washington State University's. So we made this recommendation: we need to import these cattle. And he happened to be there, and he somehow got that done. The only place in the world that got permit to bring the cattle in was the United States, and it was political.
Wow.
So those cattle, it was about 1993, the first new imports. There had been 4 bulls brought in the 70s, but there were no females. And so from 93 to 99, there were 5 different importers that brought approximately 30 full-blood bulls and approximately 200 full-blood Wagyu cattle into the United States.
Wow.
And so, and we were associated with them, some of them anyway, not all of them. And the cattle, the Australians, what happened then is that the U.S. got 1/3 of the Japanese market, the Australians had 1/3, and the Japanese produced 1/3 of their meat. And so the Wagyu that came in the 90s were all the meat was exported to Japan. It wasn't fed in the United States.
Wow.
And it was still, there was some, but most people didn't know what Wagyu was.
Yeah.
And the thing that happened then is we got mad cow disease, and that happened here in this state, in Moses Lake, and that stopped all the imports, all the exports. So there was meat stuck in the ports from Tokyo to Seattle to Oakland. And it wasn't just the meat that was stuck that couldn't be shipped on into Japan. These people that were feeding for Japan had 400 days of cattle in the feedlot that were supposed to go that direction. They had contracts that were out there 2 years to buy these calves, and they had no place to go with them. So they dumped that meat in the U.S.
Okay.
So some of them, for example, Masami Foods out of California, didn't even know how to grind hamburger because every cut was made for Japan. Okay, they had no idea. So my son went up there and helped them. They bought a grinder and they dumped a lot of these cuts that were going to Japan just in a grinder and ground them up for hamburger. Sold the meat back. All they could do is sell it back to the restaurants or anybody that would buy it for 60 cents on the dollar, because nobody had heard of it. Nobody knew what it was. Why would we buy this? What is it?
Right.
What's Wagyu? We'd use the term Kobe, which wasn't supposed to be used, but that's, people recognize that term.
Yeah.
And so that 2003 turned the Wagyu industry around from being an export industry to being an industry here in the United States.
Yeah.
And now the U.S. is probably the best. That's where everybody wants to sell their Wagyu meat now. The Australians are coming here hard, and so it's an interesting time. But the best market is in the U.S. and the world. China was a good market until COVID hit. The restaurants in China all were selling Australian Wagyu.
Okay.
COVID hit, all those restaurants shut up. Australia had no place to go with their meat.
Oh, jeez.
They've turned around, they've come in here. And
Over
so,
here. Yeah.
and they're coming strong. They think they have, and they may, 48% of the meat Wagyu sold in the U.S. is coming out of Australia.
Really?